The C-130's engines whined against the wind, drowning out every thought as we dropped through the clouds. Greenland's coast was a jagged line of white and blue, the sea frozen in place, the sky a bruised gray. I pressed my forehead to the window, breath fogging the glass, and tried to imagine what it would feel like to step onto land that never thawed. We touched down hard, tires skidding on the ice. The ramp dropped, and cold air rushed in, sharper than anything I'd ever felt. I shouldered my duffel, boots crunching on the packed snow, and followed the others toward the cluster of low, blocky buildings that made up the radar installation. The wind cut through my parka, carrying the scent of diesel and something older, metal, ozone, a hint of rot. No one spoke as we walked. The sky pressed down, heavy and endless. The only color was the red warning light spinning atop the main tower, painting the snow in slow, bloody circles. I counted the buildings: barracks, mess, comms, the dome that housed the radar array. Everything else was buried under drifts, half swallowed by the ice. A man waited by the door, face hidden behind a fur-lined hood. He checked our names off a clipboard, voice muffled. "Welcome to Thule Station. You'll get your assignments after chow. Don't wander. Don't touch anything marked with red tape. If you hear the siren, get inside and lock the doors." "That's not a drill." I nodded, heart thumping. The others shuffled past, boots squeaking on the linoleum as we entered the main building. The heat inside was stale, thick with the smell of old coffee and wet wool. I found my bunk, dropped my bag, and sat on the edge, listening to the wind rattle the window. There was a sheet of paper taped to the wall above my bed. Base rules, printed in red ink. I read them twice, the words sinking in like stones. No one else seemed to notice. Laughter echoed from the hall, but it sounded wrong. Too loud, too forced. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, and tried to shake the feeling that I just stepped out of the world I knew and into something that was waiting for me. The mess hall was nearly empty by midnight. I sat alone at a metal table, the hum of the overhead lights mixing with the distant groan of the wind. My tray was cold, half-finished, the taste of powdered eggs lingering on my tongue. I watched the others drift out in twos and threes, their laughter fading as they disappeared down the corridor. I was about to leave when I noticed a flash of color on the shelf above the coffee urn. A binder, thick and battered, its spine cracked and peeling. It was the only thing in the room that wasn't gray or white. I reached for it, fingertips tingling with something like dread. The cover was marked Thule Station. Protocols. The words stamped in red ink. I opened it, careful, as if the pages might crumble. Inside, the rules were printed in neat columns, but someone had gone through with a pen, crossing out entire sections, scribbling frantic notes in the margins. Some rules were simple. No one outside after 2200. No radio contact with unknown call signs. Others were strangers. If the radar sweeps pick up movement at grid 17, do not investigate. If you see lights on the ice, report and wait for instructions. Do not approach. One line was underlined 3 times. The ink pressed so hard it bled through the page. If you hear your name on the comms, do not respond. I flipped through the binder, heart pounding. Some pages were torn, others stained with coffee or something darker. The handwriting changed, blocky, rushed, sometimes barely legible. Don't trust the weather reports after midnight. If the siren sounds twice, it's already too late. Do not look at the sky during the blackout. A list of names filled the back cover, some crossed out, some circled. I didn't recognize any of them. At the bottom, in a shaky script, "If you're reading this, you're already part of it." I closed the binder, the snap of plastic echoing in the empty room. The wind howled against the walls, and for a moment, I thought I heard my name carried in the static. I put the binder back, hands shaking, and left the mess hall. The corridor felt longer than before, the shadows deeper. I kept my eyes down, counting my steps, the rules repeating in my mind like a prayer. Something about this place was wrong. I could feel it settling into my bones. The first night shift started at 2300. The control room was a circle of old monitors and humming consoles, the air thick with the smell of burnt dust and stale coffee. I sat at the radar station, headphones pressed to my ears, the green sweep of the screen painting my face in ghostly light. Outside, the wind battered the dome, rattling the metal like distant thunder. The others, 2 techs and a sergeant, kept to their routines, eyes fixed on their screens, voices low and clipped. No one spoke unless they had to. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft click of buttons and the endless, patient sweep of the radar. At 0117, something flickered on my screen. A blip, small and fast, moving against the wind. I leaned in, adjusting the dials, but it vanished before I could lock on. I checked the logs. No scheduled flights, no weather balloons, nothing that should be out there. I keyed the radio, voice barely above a whisper. "Control, this is Alpha. I've got an unknown contact, grid 17. Advice." Static answered me, sharp and cold. Then, just beneath the noise, a voice, garbled, distant, almost familiar. I strained to listen, heart pounding. The voice repeated a single word, over and over, lost in the static. My name. I jerked the headphones off, breath coming fast. The sergeant glanced over, eyes narrowed. "You all right?" he asked, voice flat. "Just tired?" I lied, wiping sweat from my brow. He nodded but didn't look convinced. The rest of the shift crawled by. The blip never returned, but the static lingered, a faint whisper at the edge of hearing. I wrote it up in the log, careful to keep my words neutral. Unidentified contact. Brief radio interference. No further activity. When the shift ended, I stepped outside, the cold biting through my jacket. The sky was clear, stars sharp and endless. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching from the darkness beyond the lights. I walked back to the barracks, the rules echoing in my mind. If you hear your name, do not respond. If you see lights on the ice, do not approach. I tried to believe they were just words, but the fear in my chest told me otherwise. The next morning, the base was quieter than usual. Breakfast was a silent affair, just the scrape of metal forks and the hiss of the coffee urn. I noticed an empty seat at the end of the table. Anders, the night tech, hadn't shown up. No one mentioned it, but I saw the glances, the way people avoided looking at his untouched mug. After chow, I was assigned to inventory in the comms room. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of old electronics. I found Anders' logbook open on the desk, a pen lying across the page. The last entry was dated last night. The handwriting hurried. 0134, unusual static on channel 4. Investigating interference near, the sentence trailed off, a line of ink running to the edge of the paper. I flipped back through the log. Routine checks, equipment notes, nothing strange until last night. I ran my finger over the words, feeling the pressure of his last moments. I asked the sergeant if anyone had seen Anders. He just shook his head, jaw tight. Probably sleeping it off, he muttered, but his eyes didn't meet mine. I checked the bunk room. Anders' bed was made, his boots lined up neatly beneath it. His parka hung on the hook, untouched. I found his keycard on the nightstand, next to a half-finished crossword and a photo of a woman and a little boy. The room felt abandoned, the air too still. By noon, the rumors started. Someone said they'd seen Anders heading toward the radar dome after midnight. Someone else claimed they heard footsteps on the roof, but no one went to check. The sergeant called a meeting, voice clipped and cold. No one leaves the main building alone. If you see anything unusual, report it. Do not investigate. That's an order. I nodded, the rules echoing in my mind. Don't go outside after 2200. Don't investigate grid 17. If you hear your name, do not respond. That night, I sat at my station, eyes fixed on the radar, ears straining for any sound. The static was louder now, a constant whisper at the edge of hearing. I wrote in the logbook, careful and slow. 2300, all stations manned. Anders is still missing. I wondered if anyone would ever write the next line. The wind was howling again, rattling the windows and shaking the metal walls. I sat in the radar room, the green sweep circling endlessly, the static a constant companion in my headphones. The others spoke in low voices, their faces pale in the glow of the monitors. No one mentioned Anders. No one mentioned the empty bunk. At 0213, the alarm stayed silent, but something flickered at the edge of the radar. I leaned in, adjusting the gain. There, just past grid 17, a cluster of lights moving slow and steady across the glacier. Not a plane, not a snowcat, not anything I'd ever seen. The lights were too bright, too white, gliding in a line that made no sense. I called the sergeant over. He stared at the screen, jaw clenched. "Any scheduled activity?" he asked. I shook my head. Nothing logged. No comms, no transponder. He watched for a long moment, then picked up the radio. "Base to all units. Report position." One by one, the voices checked in. Everyone accounted for. No one out on the ice. The lights kept moving, weaving in and out of the radar's range. I pressed my face to the window, squinting into the darkness. Far out on the glacier, I saw them, pinpricks of white, gliding over the snow, too smooth, too fast. They cast no shadows, left no tracks. The sergeant's voice was tight. "Log it. Don't approach. Don't open the doors for anyone, no matter what you see." I wrote it down, hand shaking. 0217. Unidentified lights observed on glacier. No response to hails. No scheduled activity. The lights paused, then began to drift apart, spreading across the ice like spilled mercury. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes moving between them, tall, thin, wrong. I blinked, and the lights were gone. The room was silent except for the hum of the radar and the wind outside. I looked at the others. No one spoke. We all knew the rules. If you see lights on the ice, report and wait. Do not approach. I stared at the empty chair where Anders used to sit and wondered if he'd seen the lights too. The wind never really stopped. It just faded and rose again, a living thing pressing against the walls. I sat alone in the comms room, the others gone to sleep or pretending to. The radar sweep was steady, the lights on the glacier gone, but the unease lingered, heavy as the cold. I flipped through the logbook, reading Anders' last entry again. The ink had bled, the words unfinished. I wondered if he'd heard it too, the static, the voice. I put on the headphones, the plastic cold against my ears, and listened to the empty channels. At first, it was just the usual noise, crackles, pops, the distant echo of the wind. Then, beneath it, something else. A whisper, almost too soft to notice. I turned the dial, searching for a signal, but the voice slipped away, hiding in the static. I leaned closer, heart pounding. The voice returned, clearer now, threading through the noise. It was my name, not shouted, not urgent, just spoken, as if someone was standing right behind me. Carter. I froze, breath caught in my throat. The rules echoed in my mind. If you hear your name on the comms, do not respond. The voice came again, softer, pleading. Carter, please. It's cold out here. Let me in. It sounded like Anders. It sounded like my mother. It sounded like every voice I'd ever trusted. Layered together, impossible. My hand hovered over the mic. I wanted to answer, to ask who was there, to break the silence. But I didn't. I sat, shaking, listening as the voice repeated my name, over and over, until it faded back into static. I wrote in the logbook, my handwriting unsteady. 0312, unidentified voice on comms. Repeated my name. No response given. I took off the headphones. The room was suddenly too quiet. The wind rattled the window, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move across the snow outside. I locked the door, checked it twice, and sat with my back to the wall, the rules running through my mind like a prayer. If you hear your name, do not respond. I didn't sleep that night. I just listened, waiting for the voice to return. The next day, the sky was a flat, endless gray. I wandered the halls, restless, the memory of the voice in the static gnawing at me. The others kept their distance, eyes down, conversations clipped and shallow. I felt like a ghost, drifting through routines that no longer made sense. In the admin office, I found a battered metal cabinet wedged behind a stack of broken chairs. The lock was rusted, the key still in it. I turned it, the click echoing in the empty room. Inside were logbooks, dozens of them, their spines cracked, pages yellowed with age. I carried a stack to the table, dust rising in the stale air. The first book was dated nearly 20 years ago. I flipped through the entries, routine checks, weather reports, equipment failures. The handwriting changed every few months, names I didn't recognize. But the pattern was always the same. The last entry always on a Thursday, always ending mid-sentence. 0142, unusual movement on radar. Will Invis 0305, lights on the ice, not responding to 0217, heard my name on channel 3. ADV each time the pen trailed off, the ink bleeding into the paper. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I checked another book, and another. Thursday. Always Thursday. I searched for Anders' name, but found only initials, dates, and the same abrupt endings. Some books had notes scrawled in the margins. Don't trust the weather after midnight. If you see your own face outside, do not open the door. The rules are for survivors. At the back of one logbook, a list of names, some crossed out, some circled. My own name wasn't there, but I knew it would be soon. I sat in the quiet, the logbooks spread around me like gravestones. The rules weren't just for order. They were warnings, left behind by those who didn't make it. I closed the books, hands shaking, and put them back in the cabinet. I locked it, pocketed the key, and left the office, the silence pressing in. That night, I watched the clock tick toward Thursday, the rules echoing in my mind. I wondered if I'd be the one to finish the next entry, or if my story would end the same way. Thursday night arrived with a sky so dark it felt like the world had ended beyond the floodlights. The wind was gone, replaced by a silence that pressed against the windows and made every sound inside the base feel too loud. I sat in the control room, the rules binder open beside me. The words in red ink burned into my mind. At 1:06, the siren wailed, one long, rising note that rattled the glass and made my heart stutter. The base had drills, but this wasn't one. The lights flickered, then steadied. Over the intercom, the sergeant's voice was tight, urgent. Lockdown protocol. All personnel to secure rooms. Do not open doors for any reason. Follow the rules. I moved fast, adrenaline burning away the cold. I locked the control room door, checked it twice, then pulled the blackout curtain over the window. The rules were clear. If the siren sounds, lock all doors. Do not respond to knocks. Do not look outside until it's all clear. The radio crackled, static thick and angry. Somewhere in the noise, I heard voices, too many, layered and wrong. My name surfaced, twisted and pleading. I turned the volume down, hands shaking. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and heavy. They stopped outside my door. A knock soft, then harder. Carter, it's me. Let me in. The voice was Anders. Or maybe it was my mother. Or maybe it was something else. I pressed my back to the door, eyes squeezed shut. The rules repeated in my mind. Do not open the door. Do not answer no matter who calls. The footsteps moved on, fading into silence. The siren wailed again, then cut off. The only sound was my own breathing and the hum of the radar, steady and patient. I waited, counting the seconds, the minutes, the hours. I didn't move. I didn't answer. I didn't look outside. When the all-clear finally sounded, I opened the door. The hallway was empty, the air colder than before. A trail of wet footprints led down the corridor, vanishing at the end. I wrote in the logbook, my hand steady for the first time in days. Lockdown protocol initiated. Rules followed. Survived. But I knew something had changed. The base had been breached. The rules had saved me this time. The next night, the wind returned, howling across the ice and battering the windows with frozen grit. I sat in the control room, eyes fixed on the radar, the rules binder open at my elbow. The others spoke in whispers, glancing at the door as if expecting it to open on its own. At 2:23, the motion sensor alarm chimed, a single sharp note that cut through the static. I checked the monitor. Out on the glacier, something moved against the wind. A dark shape crawling across the snow. It was too big for a fox, too slow for a snowcat, too steady for a man. I radioed the sergeant. Unidentified contact, grid 17. No response to hail. He answered, voice flat. Log it. Do not approach. Follow the rules. I watched the cameras, breath fogging the glass. The shape drew closer, moving with a purpose that made my skin crawl. It didn't stumble or shiver. It didn't leave tracks. The floodlights caught it for a moment. A tall, thin figure, limbs too long, head cocked at an impossible angle. Its face was a blur, shifting in the glare. I called out, voice trembling. This is Thule Station. Identify yourself. The thing stopped. For a moment, I thought it would answer. Instead, it turned its head, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then it kept moving, circling the base, always just outside the reach of the lights. The others gathered behind me, silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The rules were clear. Do not open the doors. Do not go outside. Do not make eye contact. The thing paused at the main entrance, pressing a hand, if you could call it that, against the glass. The window frosted over, the cold seeping through the room. I held my breath, heart pounding. Stayed there for a long time, watching, waiting. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it turned and vanished into the storm, swallowed by the snow and darkness. We stood in silence, the only sound the wind and the hum of the radar. I wrote in the logbook, my hand shaking, unidentified entity approached base. No response to hails. No breach. But I knew it would be back. And next time, the rules might not be enough. The storm raged for 2 days, wide-out winds shaking the walls, snow piling against the doors. We rationed power, huddled in the control room, the rules binder always within reach. No one slept. No one spoke of Anders or the thing in the snow. We just waited, listening to the wind and the static. On the third night, the emergency alarm blared. Short, sharp, insistent. I checked the monitors. The outer airlock was open. Someone was outside. I grabbed the radio, voice tight. Who's out there? A burst of static, then a voice, faint, desperate. Carter, it's me. I'm stuck. Please, you have to let me in. It was Jensen, the youngest tech, his voice cracking with fear. Something's out here. Please. The rules screamed in my mind. Do not open the doors during a breach. Do not respond to voices, no matter who they sound like. I looked at the others. The sergeant shook his head, eyes hollow. You open that door, we're all dead. Jensen's voice came again, closer now, muffled by the wind. Carter, please. I can see the lights. I'm freezing. Don't leave me out here. I moved to the door, hand on the lock. My heart was hammered. I remembered the rules, the warnings in red ink, the names crossed out in the logbooks. I remembered Anders, the thing in the snow, the voice in the static. I closed my eyes, tears burning. I'm sorry, I whispered, voice breaking. I can't. The pounding on the door grew frantic, then stopped. Silence pressed in, heavy and final. I slid to the floor, back against the steel, the rules binder in my lap. The others sat in silence, grief and relief tangled together. We survived. But at what cost? I wrote in the logbook, the words blurring, Emergency protocol enacted. Did not open the door. One lost. I stared at the page, the ink bleeding into the paper. The rules had saved us, but I wondered how many more times I could follow them. How many more names would be lost to the snow? Outside, the storm howled, and I knew the worst was not over. The storm finally broke, leaving the world outside silent and white, the sky a pale bruise above the endless ice. The base felt emptier than ever. Jensen's bunk was stripped, his boots still lined up beneath it, untouched. No one spoke his name. We just moved through the motions, shadows of ourselves. That night, the radar picked up nothing. No blips, no lights, just the steady sweep and the hum of the old machines. I sat alone in the comms room, the rules binder open, the logbook waiting. My hands shook as I turned on the radio, the static filling the silence. I keyed the mic, voice low. Thule station to command. This is Carter Hayes. We've lost 2. Protocols followed. No breach, but something is out here. Something that knows our names. The static answered, then a faint voice, my own, echoing back at me, twisted and wrong. Carter, come outside. It's safe now. We need you. I stared at the radio, fear crawling up my spine. I knew what the rules said. Do not respond. Do not trust the voices. But I was so tired, so cold. I wrote in the logbook, the words heavy, final transmission. If you're reading this, follow the rules. Don't answer the voices. Don't open the door. Survive. I looked around the empty room, the walls closing in. I thought of my mother, of Anders, of Jensen. I wondered if anyone would ever read these words, or if the snow would swallow them, too. The lights flickered. The wind picked up again, rattling the glass. I heard footsteps in the hall, slow, deliberate, stopping outside the door. A voice, soft and familiar, called my name. I turned off the radio, closed the logbook, and waited in the dark, the rules echoing in my mind. Outside, the wind howled, and I knew the end was near. The C-130 touched down hard, tires skidding on the ice, engines roaring against the endless white. The new technician stepped out, breath curling in the frozen air, duffel slung over one shoulder. The sky was a pale, unbroken gray, the base of a cluster of low buildings huddled against the wind. A sergeant met him at the door, clipboard in hand, voice muffled by his hood. Welcome to Thule Station. You'll get your assignment after chow. Don't wander. Don't touch anything marked with red tape. If you hear the siren, get inside and lock the doors. That's not a drill. The new arrival nodded, eyes wide, boots crunching on the snow as he followed the others inside. The heat was stale, thick with the scent of old coffee and wet wool. He found his bunk, dropped his bag, and sat on the edge, listening to the wind rattle the window. On the table beside his bed, a binder waited, worn, red-inked, the words Base Rules stamped across the cover. He flipped it open, reading the protocols, the frantic notes in the margins, the names crossed out and circled. At the bottom, a line in shaky handwriting. If you're reading this, you're already part of it. He wandered the halls, the base quiet, the others moving through their routines with tired eyes. In the comms room, he found a logbook, the last page filled with a final entry. If you're reading this, follow the rules. Don't answer the voices. Don't open the door. Survive. He ran his fingers over the words, feeling the weight of them settle in his chest. The wind howled outside, and for a moment, he thought he heard his name carried in the static. He closed the logbook, the room suddenly colder. Somewhere down the hall, laughter echoed, too loud, too forced. He looked at the rules again, the red ink bright against the yellowed paper. The cycle had begun again. The base waited, silent and patient, for the next story to be written. Outside, the snow fell, erasing every trace of what came before.